Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to Module 4 of the CompTIA A course. Today's module is titled Comparing Local Networking Hardware. As for the main sections in this specific module, that will be things like compare network types, compare networking hardware, network cable types, and then the fourth and the last section will be compare wireless networking types. Now, I've said it before and I'll say it again. These are simply the main sections in this module, and it's not really a reflection of all the topics covered in this specific module. So if you would like a more accurate idea or a list of what is actually being covered in this specific module, that you can find in the video description down below. And next to these topics, I'll go and add very nice convenient timestamps for you to go and make use of. That's still not everything in this module, so that's just to give you a more accurate idea of what is in the module and also to help you guys find a specific topic if you want to go and revise on a certain topic or if you're just looking for something specific in this module. Now, before we jump into that first main section there, if you haven't done it already, please give this video a like. I normally ask you guys to do that. It's one of the ways you guys can show me that you actually appreciate me doing this, because I am doing this for free, for crying out loud. And if you'd like to know when Module 5 comes out or when I upload other things on this channel, remember to maybe also subscribe, otherwise you might miss it. So now that I've got my selfless promo out of the way, let's jump into that first main section, which was, of course, compare network types. Now within this section, we're going to jump right into things, and I am going to start you guys off with network types. So what are the different network types we actually get? There's many, guys. So the ones you need to know for A+, and the ones you need to know for your A+ exams would be things like personal area network. This is more commonly known as PAN for short. You guys need to know a local area network, LAN for short. You need to be aware or know of wireless local area network. We just call this WLAN for short. You need to know or be familiar with MAN, in other words, Metropolitan Area Network. And then lastly, folks, you need to know Wide Area Network, in other words, WAN for short. So there you guys have it. There's a bit of a list of the ones you guys need to know for A+, especially if you plan on sitting for the exams of A+. I'm going to take you guys a little bit deeper than that. I'm not just going to leave you guys out, to salvage for yourself. So let's go and take a look at each and every one of these individually. Starting with the first one on this list being, of course, the personal area network. All right, so here we are, personal area network. What can we say about this? Well, surprisingly, a lot of people have actually never heard of this, and yet we all use it. Guys, this is actually one of the most common networks we find. So if you, for example, have a desk in front of you, and on that desk you have something like a laptop or a desktop on that desk, basically anything that's within arm's reach on that desk, that can basically be part of your PAN, if you want to consider that. So if I have something like a printer or a scanner on that desk, if I have my cell phone on that desk or a tablet, anything that's basically within arm's reach can be considered part of your PAN. It doesn't matter if these items are connected wirelessly or via some sort of wire, doesn't matter. It's part of your PAN. And as soon as I so much as connect one other desktop or laptop, this could be literally across from me, then it's no longer a PAN, then we're moving into LAN territory, which we're going to get to in just a moment. So PAN is one of the smallest networks found. Like I said, it's pretty much literally just what you can fit onto your desk. It usually involves only one person in most cases, because as soon as you go and connect one other device, then we're moving into LAN territory. So this personal area network, like I said, anything that fits onto the desk, it doesn't matter if it's wired or wireless, but if it's wireless, this could be Bluetooth, it could be infrared, it could be near field communication, in other words, NFC or IR, or it could obviously be a cable. So guys, that is a little bit about the PAN side of coin. Going back to our list here. The next type of network you guys need to know, which I'm fairly certain most of you guys know already, this is probably one of the most well-known networks and one of the most common networks that most folks are familiar with, is, of course, local area network, commonly referred to as LAN. So here I've got a dedicated section for you guys about local area network. So this network is generally going to reside in only one building. You will normally find it in only one building, but it could possibly extend to multiple buildings. You might wonder how that is possible, since LAN cables actually have a limit of about 100 meters. At least that's what the manuals tells us. We know in reality it's actually less than that. But according to the manuals and according to the exam, a LAN cable can only go up to a maximum of 100 meters if we're talking about the metric system here. In reality, you'll be lucky if you can get about 90 or 95 meters out of those cables. So how do we link multiple buildings together then with multiple LANs, to get them to form part of the same LAN, if a LAN cable cannot exactly go that far? Well, folks, we normally do that via wireless. You'll find in quite a lot of cases there will be a dish up on the one building's roof, there'll be a dish up on the other building's roof. These are often going to reside in the same office park or something, and these buildings will be connected to one another wirelessly, forming part of the same LAN. Now, granted, this is not the most common thing you will find, but it is certainly out there. On average, in the average building, the LAN will only be within that building. Something else you guys need to be aware of: LANs, in other words, local area network, is not just limited to desktop computers and laptop computers. This could these days actually be a lot of other things. I mean, heck, this could be a server for all we know. This could be firewalls. This could be access points. This could be routers. This could be printers and scanners. There's a lot of things that can actually form part of a network. In essence, anything you can connect to a LAN cable within that same building can actually, in fact, be part of your LAN, believe it or not. Alrighty, now before we go back to that list of ours, here's actually a bit of a picture I want to show you guys, and I am going to use this exact same picture for some of the other ones. So I'm going to use this for LAN, MAN, and WAN. Now currently we are on LAN, and if you look at that picture at the bottom there, you can see LAN is a building. Could be more than one, but it's usually going to be in one of those buildings. And generally, if you're going to go and link those buildings together, it would normally not be the same LAN. It's actually going to be, in fact, multiple LANs. So we'll get to this in just a bit again once we start talking about MAN and WAN. So before we do that, let's go back to our list here once more. As you can see, we're not going to talk about MAN or WAN quite yet. Next up, we've got wireless local area network. So in other words, a WLAN. So we just spoke of what a LAN is. Now we're going to talk about a WLAN. In essence, this is actually the same freaking thing, to be honest with you guys. The only real difference here is this LAN is wireless. How do we get a wireless LAN? Well, you're going to go and use something like access points or routers. It doesn't really matter. Anything that can basically go and take your existing network and broadcast it wirelessly. Now, every company and every home has at least one router, and depending on how big this building is, that router might not be enough to broadcast the signal wirelessly across the whole building because, well, it obviously has limited range. So depending on how big the building is, you might have to give this router a bit of a push, if you will, and this can obviously be done using access points. So using network cables, LAN cables in other words, you'll be plugging these little doohickeys into LAN cables, and that's going to ultimately extend your wireless range. So what can we say about local area network? It is a LAN network which is, well, just wireless, like we said. It uses 802.11 technologies. So you'll find whether we're talking about cabled networks or wireless networks, they normally talk about networks as 802 dot something. And if you see a .11 behind the 802, that normally indicates that this is a wireless network of some kind. And behind the 11, you'll normally see some sort of letter or letters showing you which kind of standard or wireless frequency we're actually dealing with here. At this point in time, there's about 6 we deal with, but you only need to know 4 of those for your A+ exam and for this specific course. If any of you guys plan on doing the Network Plus course and sitting for that Network Plus exam, then you in fact need to know all 6 of these standards and not just 4. Now, what is wireless also good for? Well, it's sometimes very good to use this in those pesky, hard to reach areas in the building. Sometimes, there's a certain office somewhere in the office, where it's just really not feasible to get a network cable there because of where it's located. Maybe for me to get a network cable into that particular office, I would have to resort to maybe drilling through some concrete walls, or climbing through some sort of roof where it is just really not possible to climb through that roof because of how low it is or anything in that regard. So when you find yourself in a pesky situation where it's really hard to get a network cable into a certain area, wireless might be your answer. So what can we say? It gives us lots of flexibility. I mean, it's wireless. It goes through ceilings, it goes through walls, obviously depending on what these walls and ceilings are made of and how thick they are, but it gives you flexibility nonetheless. And if you ever find yourself in a situation where that range of that router or that access point is not far enough, well, not a problem. Just add more access points. You can very easily extend the range at any point in time by simply just adding more access points. And it actually does come with very good security, I might add. So if need be, you can go and enforce proper good security. Not a problem. All right, going back to that list once more. Now, finally, we can get back to the LAN MAN WAN saga, if you want to call it that. So let's talk about the Metropolitan Area Network, MAN. So this is, I think you guys can guess this much, it's a bigger network than a LAN, so it's usually larger than a local area network. But at the same time, it is usually smaller than the other one we're going to talk about next, which is a wide area network. So it usually consists of multiple LANs in multiple buildings. So if you have a network in one building, that will be referred to as a LAN usually. But if you've got multiple buildings, each with their own LAN network, and you would like to go and link these multiple buildings together to one another, that is usually in most cases referred to as a MAN. How you do that and why you do that is completely up to you, your client, your organization, whatever the situation might be. But the point here is linking multiple buildings together, which has their own LANs, would be referred to as a MAN. These buildings are generally going to be scattered across, maybe different parts of town, but they could be next to one another for all we know. So yeah, once more, here is that picture for you guys. You guys can see there at the bottom, that is different buildings at the bottom, which we did talk about in the previous topic, LAN. And you can see now we're there in the middle section where it's a MAN. Different buildings linked together. Now going back to that list once more, now we can move on to that last one there, which was WAN, wide area network. So with wide area network, this is usually used to connect networks over great distances. To be honest with you guys, this can actually very often be different countries, for crying out loud. So this could be multiple MANs. Previously, we just spoke about MANs. And if I, God forbid, find myself in a situation where I have multiple MANs, and yes, that is possible, folks, I can, in fact, go and link multiple MANs now together, and that would be considered a WAN. So if I've got a MAN in one city and I've got a MAN network in another city, and if I feel like I want to go and connect these different cities to one another, this could be in different countries, that, folks, is a WAN. So generally, multiple MAN networks connected together is considered a WAN. Could possibly extend over multiple countries, like I just said, and it is usually way slower than a LAN because this is obviously going to span over great distances, and this is obviously due to the technology we're using because of its being wireless and things like that. Well, folks, that, believe it or not, brings us to the end of the first main section in this module, and now we can actually jump into that second main section, which is compare networking hardware. Once again, if you guys haven't done it yet, please remember to give the video a like or to subscribe if you'd like to know when Module 5 comes out. With that out of the way, let's jump into our first topic in this section, which is network interface cards. So for those of you that is not very familiar with IT yet, I'm using the word yet because at some point in time you guys are going to know all of this stuff. It's only a matter of time. But for those of you that don't know yet, a network interface card is commonly known as a NIC. So whenever you hear someone say NIC, or when you go write the exam and you see them talking about NIC, asking about NIC or referring to NIC, now you know what that is, because that's what's most likely going to happen in the A+ exam. There might be a question which is not necessarily directly about a NIC, but he or she or it or the exam will be referring to a NIC, and if you don't know what NIC stands for, in other words, what the abbreviation is for, yeah, that could actually catch you with your pants on your knees, and that's not a situation you want to find yourself in. So remember, folks, NIC is just an abbreviation for the actual network interface card. That is the card that gives your desktop or your laptop the ability to connect to your home network or to your office network. You get different kinds of NICs. You get the NIC that can accept a network cable, in other words, a LAN cable, which is also known as an Ethernet cable. So those kinds, you'll find on pretty much any desktop PC, and the majority of laptops also has a network interface card that takes LAN cables. So what can we say here? Desktop computers normally come out with only an Ethernet NIC. But if you go look at a laptop computer, these normally come out with both. They come out of an Ethernet NIC, the one that takes a LAN cable, and at the same time, they come out with a wireless NIC. Now, some people are actually under the impression that this is all the same thing. They think it is one NIC that allows them to connect to a cable as well as the wireless when it comes to laptops, and that actually couldn't be more wrong. In most laptops, if you were to go and open them up, you will find that the LAN cable NIC and the one that connects to wireless networks, these are in fact two different network cards. Yes. Now, just because a desktop computer can normally only connect to an Ethernet cable, that doesn't mean it is limited to an Ethernet cable. Absolutely not, folks. Did you know you can actually go and insert an expansion card into a desktop computer? It looks like this. There's a picture for you guys, which will give a desktop computer wireless capability. Yes. So laptops by default has wireless capability. They can go and connect to network cables. Desktops by default can only connect to cables, but that does not restrict them or limit them to the cables. You can at any point in time go get yourself a wireless network card for a desktop. You put that expansion card into one of your PCI slots, if you know what a PCI slot is, and that will essentially give your desktop PC the ability to go and connect wirelessly to a network if you find yourself in a sticky situation like that. All right, folks, moving on to our next topic here, hubs. So in this exam, I can guarantee you, you're going to get asked about hubs. And I can guarantee you, you're going to get asked about switch, which is going to be our next topic. So hubs and switches. You need to know what they are. You need to know the difference between these two. And you need to know the benefits and the drawbacks of these two. So the very first thing I want to mention to you guys about a hub, this is a dumb device. Yes, you heard correctly. We actually call it a dumb device. It's a dumb device because, well, it is dumb. For lack of a better description. Why do we say that though? Because it sends out signals out of all its ports. Now, at first glance, if you have never seen a hub, they actually look the same as a switch. At first glance, you might actually think it's a switch and confuse it with a switch. So if you've got multiple devices connected to a hub, just like a switch, there's a picture for you guys. You can see there's a picture there on the right hand side. So if these devices are all connected to the same hub, just obviously plugged into different ports on that hub using LAN cables. Now, if any one of these machines, let's say machine A there, the top left, if that machine sends data to another machine, let's say it sends the data to machine C at the bottom left there, what that hub will go and do is it is going to go and broadcast that communication out of all its ports. So this could be something confidential. It could be something private, which was meant for only PC C there, but now computer B and computer D will also get that communication, whatever it might be. Maybe the person using computer A there wanted to send a payslip or something very confidential to computer C. But now whatever the confidential document was, it's going to get broadcasted out of all its ports to all the other devices. That's a real predicament, wouldn't you guys say? A switch does the exact opposite. So a switch, which we're still getting to, but I'm kind of jumping the gun here, would not do that. If PCA sends some communication to PCC there, only the intended recipient would get that communication. So a hub is a dumb device, a switch is not a dumb device. Something else I want to mention to you guys about hubs, unfortunately the performance is reduced by contention. So the more devices you've got connected to that hub, the slower the performance is going to be. So if you've got multiple devices sending, various communication, due to the fact of it broadcasting out of all its ports at the same time, and there being multiple PCs communicating at the same time, this has implications. In other words, reduced performance, and this is not due to contention, the more devices there is. This is not something that you'll encounter on a switch, so if the data only being sent to the intended recipient on a switch, if you've got multiple devices communicating, it's not necessarily going to go and reduce your performance. Lastly, folks, before we move on to our next topic being a switch, half duplex. The speed on a hub is only half duplex. You can see there it is insanely slow. So yeah, but that was not really a problem back in the day when we used these. So you're not going to be able to find a hub anywhere in any store. The only place you might be lucky is if you go dig in someone's garage that's got a lot of old hardware. Maybe the back of the garage is an old box where it's got content that's maybe 20 years old or 30 years old. You might get lucky and find an old hub there. Chances are it's probably not even going to work anymore. So yeah, back then that was the speed was insanely slow, but that was not a problem back then because that was the most we needed. Nowadays, obviously, we need a heck of a lot more speed. All right, now moving on to the next topic, like I said I would, switches. You'll see on the right-hand side that the picture looks kind of the same, but this time, I want you guys to imagine that center device there where the number 3 is. I want you guys to imagine that being a switch and not a hub. So previously it was a hub. That's the dumb device that sends out of all of its ports. This time, that center device being number 3 is a switch, which only sends data to the intended recipient. So there's a bit of a picture for you guys. This is a brand called D-Link. The brand doesn't matter. The model doesn't matter, but that's a very common brand you'll find in a lot of countries. So that is the intelligent device. Now, for the sake of space, I'm going to move that out of the way a little bit here because I need some room here to write some stuff here for you guys. So I'm going to move it here to the bottom right. What can we say about switches? Well, switches forward traffic to a specific port by learning MAC addresses. Yes, people, that's right. Learning MAC addresses. That is how it ensures that traffic does not go to unintended recipients, that it goes to a specific device because MAC addresses are unique to devices. IP addresses we can change. MAC addresses theoretically we cannot. You can think of that as your ID number / social security number, which is something unique to you. And that is the same thing when it comes to network devices. It's unique address to any device on a network. And that's how a switch ensures that traffic does not go to unintended recipients. It allows each port to operate at full duplex and full speed, unlike a hub, which is half duplex and really, really slow. So yeah, if you would like to use a faster network, switch is the way to go. It's just benefits all the way, folks. And this is definitely required if you plan on using some sort of gigabit Ethernet, which is pretty much all the cables we use these days. All right, so still on the topic of switches, did you folks know you get different kinds of switches? You get unmanaged and then you get managed switches. And even that is not the only kinds of switches you get. You also get PoE switches. That's something we're still getting to shortly. So when it comes to unmanaged and managed switches, an unmanaged switch works without configuration. So that's basically a cheap switch, if I have to sum it up. It's a cheap switch that you can go and buy at pretty much any local computer store or tech store. And that cheap switch has little to no configuration, which means you cannot really go and log into it. You cannot really go and configure anything on it. It's a plug and play. You're going to plug into the power. You're going to go plug assorted devices into those ports, and you are on your way. Assuming those devices are connected, to the ports, assuming they've got the correct IP configuration and all that kinds of jazz, they should, in essence, have communication. Then you get a managed switch. A managed switch is something that you can actually log into. So as soon as you are connected to that network with a laptop or a desktop or something, you can go and type in the IP address of that switch, log into that switch, kind of like a router or something, and you can go and configure that switch in all kinds of ways. What you can configure and how you configure, that's obviously going to depend on what kind of brand and model we're talking about. The more expensive it is and the more fancy it is, the more functionality you obviously get. So yeah, you've got a configuration interface. You've got lots of additional functionality. How much is obviously determined by the make and the model. And then you've got a web and command line interface. So like I said, you're going to go and log into it like a router. Type in the IP address in the browser. type the username, type the password, log in, and then take it from there. Now moving on to power over Ethernet. And yes, I am still getting to the PoE switches we spoke of, so that's actually going to form part of this topic. So power over Ethernet, for the folks not familiar, is usually known as PoE. Majority of IT guys, including myself, normally call this PoE. So the next time you hear someone on IT say PoE, we're actually talking about power over Ethernet. What does this mean though? It means you're sending power over an Ethernet cable, usually a LAN cable. The reason we would do that is for devices that are located in areas where power is a bit of a problem. This could be something like an access point. So an access point is normally located in a place like a ceiling, and we don't exactly have power plugs there on the ceiling, so that becomes a bit of a problem when we need to give power to an access point. But we do normally have network cables in the roofs or the ceilings. So the idea here is, as soon as you plug that LAN cable slash network cable into the device in question, which in this case is an access point, it should ideally power it up. So yes, PoEs are commonly used in areas where power is not necessarily accessible, like a roof or a ceiling. Commonly used on things like access points, which are known as APs for short, or VoIP phones. Now VoIP phones, that's a bit of a different can of worms. VoIP phones are normally located where, guys? They're located on someone's desk. At someone's desk, there normally is power because you've got a computer there. You can actually go and plug it into a wall socket if need be. But if you plug your phone into a wall socket, to give it power, it looks unprofessional. It looks unappealing. It looks, I don't know, it just doesn't look nice. So what the majority of companies will go and do, this is normally for most medium and large size companies, they will remove the power cable that comes with the phone, it comes included in the box, and instead they will give power to this phone via the network cable that plugs into it. Almost all VoIP phones does accept this kind of cable. So all you need to do is you just go and plug in the network cable, which you would have plugged into that phone anyway. And now you'll notice as soon as you plug that network cable into that VoIP phone, presto, behold, it is going to turn on. So on a desk with a phone, I would say that's more of a choice. I wouldn't say it's compulsory, maybe in some cases, but usually it's a choice. It just looks better, it looks more appealing, it looks more professional because there's less cables lying around. When it comes to things like access points, on the other hand, that is not always a choice. That is more a matter of I don't have a freaking choice. There's no wall sockets in the ceiling, and I need to connect that access point to the network via cable that we already have in the roof. But at the same time, I need to give it power. How the cheese do I do that? Well, via the network cable, folks. So this can be something small like a PoE box. So when I say PoE box, I'm talking about the actual PoE thingy that's going to give your network cable power. So how do we send power into the network cable? It can be something small like a PoE box. It can also be a full-blown PoE switch, which we're going to get to shortly. So when it comes to a PoE box, in case nobody knows what it looks like, there is an example. It goes without saying it's not limited to that example, but that's more or less what you can expect. So what you folks will go and do is you're going to go and plug in the LAN cable, network cable, into one of those ports you see there in that little PoE box. The other end of that cable is going to go to the device that requires power and at the same time requires a data connection. And what you can't see in that picture of mine is there's actually a power cable behind that thing that plugs into a normal wall socket. So it's a normal network cable. It plugs into the one port there that says LAN. The other part of the cable goes out of the PoE port there, goes to the device that requires power as well as a data connection. And at the same time, that little black PoE box or whatever it is going to plug into a power source of sorts. And that's going to send power into that network cable. Now, as you can see there on my list, I mentioned a PoE device can also be a full-blown switch, which is usually the case in a bigger company. So when it comes to small households or small businesses, it's probably just going to be the small PoE box because it's cheaper and it's easier. When it comes to medium to large size organizations, it's going to be a full-blown switch. You'll find that on these switches, it actually says PoE on the switch. It'll say PoE switch, capital P, small o, capital E. It says PoE switch. That does not necessarily mean the company will use it for that functionality, but it is still nice to have that option should you need it, which most companies will. So what do most companies use this for most commonly? It's usually for access points and VoIP phones. Any network cable you plug into that switch can be plugged into a device that requires power, and it will in fact power up that device without any additional power source. Pretty nifty, pretty useful, I must say. Well guys, that finally concludes the end of the second main section of this module, which brings us to the third main section of this module, which is network cable types. If you guys are still watching this video at this point in time, please do me a favor and drop a comment down below. If you've learned something new, let me know what you learned. It's always fun to see what people have learned. If you find my examples humorous or helpful, let me know, because then I can do more of that. If you've got any questions about anything that's been discussed in this specific module so far, also feel free to drop that down below. I am going to ask you guys to try and keep the questions to that specific module. So if you've got questions about something that was discussed in this module, being module 4, preferably try to keep that question in the comment section of this module. If you're going to go to module 4 now, and you're going to start asking questions about module 3 or module 5, that's not nice, because then when other people go and read the questions or the comments, you're going to go and confuse those other people. So try and keep your questions to the comment section of the relevant module. So yeah, unless you just want to go and ask a question about the course in general, that's a different story. Alright folks, so with me jabbering all of that, let's go into the first topic in this third section. That would be unshielded twisted pair. Now, if you don't know what that is, you can actually see I've got a couple of pictures here on the sides for you guys already. It's a form of network cable. It is a LAN cable. This is commonly known as UTP cable, which obviously stands for unshielded twisted pair. It is, in fact, the most common kind of network cable you will get. The second most common kind of network cable you will get is STP. In other words, shielded twisted pair. So you get UTP and you get STP. UTP is unshielded. STP is in fact shielded. UTP is usually a heck of a lot cheaper, and it's obviously way more common. STP is used in situations where, well, interference might be a bit of a problem. And yeah, STP unfortunately costs a little bit more money. So yeah, unshielded twisted pair is copper wire carrying electrical signals for your computers, your laptops, your whatever, on the network. It is 4 balanced wire pairs. So if you were to go and cut off that little coating, which is known as plenum on your LAN cable, you'll find it's going to expose 4 pairs of wires, 8 wires in total. So you will find orange and orange white, green and green white, brown and brown white, and lastly blue and blue white. You'll also notice that these are twisted around one another for some reason. Majority of cables, well, almost all, I wouldn't say all, but almost all cables, if you cut them open, they are normally twisted around each other. So orange and orange white will be twisted around one another. Same for green and green white, brown and brown white, and blue white. Why is this? It is to reduce interference. So just like other things that can interfere with network cables, power cables, fluorescent lights, that kinds of stuff, the wires themselves, believe it or not, can actually interfere with one another. So to reduce this, in an effort to reduce this, the wires are in fact twisted around one another. It's not 100% foolproof, but it is pretty damn effective, I must say. Now, something I mentioned to you guys earlier, and I'll mention it again because it's very important for the exam, signal attenuation limits maximum distance to 100 meters. So if you go and grab any A plus or N plus manual, or if you go check anything online, they'll tell you a network cable, a LAN cable in other words, can go to a maximum of 100 meters. That is a question exam. Now, I don't know if you guys are going to get that question exam because the possible pool of questions is quite large, but one of the questions in the pool is to check if you know what the maximum distance for a LAN cable is. Now, theoretically, according to the manuals and all that, the theory says the maximum distance is 100 meters. In real life, however, I can guarantee you, you will not get 100 meters. You'll probably get it between 80 and 90 meters on average. Maybe 90, best case scenario, you'll get 95 meters. And this is determined by, various variables. It'll depend on whether you've got solid copper in those wires, if it's flexi copper, It'll depend on, whether this LAN cable of yours is near anything that gives off interference, like power cables, fluorescent lights, heavy machinery. So assuming it's best case scenario where there's no interference, you've got solid copper in a straight line, then you'll be lucky if you get 95 meters. But you will most certainly not get 100 meters. I guarantee it. All right, moving on to the other one, which we just mentioned, shielded twisted pair. Now, you'll see immediately this looks similar, but at the same time, it looks different. What is different? Well, it has a shield, folks. You get two kinds of shielded twisted pair that you don't actually need to know for this course, and you also don't need to know that for the exam. I'm just mentioning it to you guys because why the heck not? So shielded twisted pair is screening or shielding as an extra protection against interference. So when you've got that shield, which is basically tinfoil for lack of a better description, it's going to prevent interference. Does it completely stop it? Absolutely not. But it is very, very effective at preventing interference. So now going forward, if you bring that cable near some sort of fluorescent light, some power cables, the interference is going to be kept to a minimal, which is ideally what we want. So screen cable has one outer foil shield around all pairs. That will be the cable you guys see here at the bottom left, the one that's got the blue coating. If you pay close attention, you'll see there is 4 pairs of wires, 8 wires in total, with one shield around all the wires. That is screened cable. And when you get cables called fully shielded cable, this has got a braided outer screen and it's got foil around the individual pairs. So if you look at the bottom right cable there, you'll find that those 4 pairs have got shielding around them individually. And then on top of that, it's got another braiding around that. So that is probably the best kind of quality cable you can get. And believe me, it comes at a price. So nothing in life is for free. So expect to pay a little extra for that, folks. Now, since we're talking about network cables, more specifically LAN cables, something you guys need to know for your exam is CAT standards. So we talk about the word CAT a lot. CAT is actually short for category. So when you see someone, or if you write this somewhere, and if you hear someone say CAT, we're talking about category. So if I say CAT 5, I'm talking about category 5. If I say CAT 6, I'm talking about category 6. Now you know what that actually means. Here's a bit of a table for you guys, so try your best to familiarize yourself with this table. You do not need to know the full table here. The only things I would focus on at this point in time, folks, is the capacity. That's the only real thing you need to worry about here. Maximum distance I would ignore because it's the same for all of them. You might argue with me and say, but hey, on that table, you've got one there that says 50 meters. Guys, they're not going to ask you that one on an exam, and there's no company out there that actually uses that cable. Just no. Don't worry about it. The ones you need to know is Cat 5, Cat 5e, Cat 6, the one specifically that goes at a speed of 1 gigabits per second and 100 meters, and then Cat 6a. Now, in real life, I can tell you there's actually more categories out there. You do actually get Cat 3. Yes, there's something called Cat 3. You do actually get Cat 7. And you do, at this point in time, actually even get Cat 8. I kid you not. Now, the chances of you finding Cat 8 is extremely unlikely. You probably won't see it. You probably won't hear about it for the next 5 or 10 years because it's exceptionally rare and it can really only go to a maximum of about 20 or 30 meters. Yep, that minimal. It's really, really insane. Now, when it comes to the N plus exam, if any of you plan on taking it that far, then you need to know all the ones I just mentioned. You need to know Cat 3, Cat 7, Cat 8. You need to know their maximum distances, their maximum speeds, their frequencies. Everything is what you need to know when it comes to Network Plus. If any of you guys plan on writing Network Plus exam, I do have the Network Plus course on my channel as well. And there is a dedicated video where I cover specifically just that. So yeah, go check that video if you want to know more about this. There's a dedicated video that covers specifically just that. I think what I might do for you guys, for those of you that's curious, I'll maybe put that in the video description down below. There's going to be a link in the video description down below that'll link you straight to that specific video in the Network Plus course. So if anyone wants to know more about this, not necessarily for the exam, but maybe just in general, Go check that video out. It'll show you specifically just these categories and obviously in great detail. So yeah, go check it out if you feel you want to know more about that. So Cat 5, that is pretty much the lowest ranking LAN cable you can get. You can see there the maximum speed is about 100 megabits per second. Obviously, it goes the common maximum distance of 100 meters. Then you get Cat 5e. Now, visually, that cable looks exactly the same as a Cat 5 cable. The difference there is it's 10 times faster, folks. You get Cat 6 cable. Now, that cable goes the same speed as Cat 5e, but visually, it looks different, guys. Visually, you'll notice it's thicker. If you hold a Cat 5e cable, or Cat 5, because they're the same, and you hold a Cat 6 cable in your hand, you will find the Cat 6 one is quite a bit thicker. It's the copper is thicker, so the quality is actually a lot better. So if you want 1 gigabits per second speed, I would encourage you to go and use a Cat 6 cable over a Cat 5e cable. Now these days you don't actually get Cat 5e cable. I mean, good luck trying to find one of those. Then you get that other Cat 6 one there, which we're not going to talk about. That goes up to a speed of 10 gigabits per second, but it is limited to 50 meters. So why would I go and use that cable when I can go get myself Cat 6a, which goes at the same speed but twice the distance? So you can see why companies don't exactly go and use that cable, because, well, it's kind of pointless. It's redundant. And of course, you get Cat 7 and Cat 8. If you want to know more about those, go check the video in the video description down below that I mentioned for N+. If anyone is wondering what the heck Cat 3 is, Cat 3 is two kinds of cable, guys. The last time they used that for computers and laptops and stuff was in the 90s. Its speed was a mere 10 megabits per second. But keep in mind, even though that's insanely slow, that is all we needed in the early 90s. Now, Cat 3 cable could be used for computers back then, but it could also be used for telephones. Until this day, a lot of countries still use this for telephones. Your good old-fashioned conventional telephone line, landline, that you plug into your old telephones, those, believe it or not, is not just called a POTS line, P-O-T-S, it is also called a Cat 3 cable. So Cat 3 cables could be a telephone line, an old landline. At the same time, it can be a network cable for a computer or a laptop. Now that you are not going to find. The last time you would have seen that is in the 90s. If anyone here is from the 90s, maybe you're fortunate, maybe you saw one of those. At this point in time where we are now, we still get Cat 3, but it only comes forth in the shape and form of a telephone cable, guys. So now you know what Cat 3 is too. You don't actually need to know that for the exam anymore. They will ask you, however, in the exam, what is a telephone line, or what is a POTS? A POTS, capital P, capital O, capital T, capital S. What is POTS? POTS is an abbreviation that stands for plain old telephone system, which refers to the good old-fashioned landline cables we used to get. Now you know. Alright folks, let's talk about copper cabling installation tools. So we're more actually going to be focusing on the LAN cable tools. So when I say copper cables, I'm actually referring more specifically to the LAN cable side of things. If we're talking about things like, I don't know, coaxial cable, those kinds of tools, it's more other kinds of tools you're going to be using. So when it comes to LAN cables, the most widely used tool and the most common tool we get is a cable crimper. Anyone that is anyone in IT would tell you what a cable crimper is. It is the crimper that we use to go and crimp a network cable. So essentially what this tool does is it puts the connector onto the network cable. So you're going to go and take off the coating of the cable. You're going to expose the 8 wires. You're going to get them in the order you want. You're going to cut them even. And then eventually you're going to end up putting those 8 wires into the transparent connector, which is known as an RJ45 connector. And once you put them in there and you verify that they're in the correct order, you verify that they're the same length, you are going to go and put that cable crimper over that connector. You're going to press down as hard as you possibly can, and that is going to go and put it into permanent position. It's going to lock it into place. These can be bought at pretty much any computer store. You can buy them online. They really don't cost that much. Then you also get something called a punch down tool. Now, unlike the crimper, which is pretty much a must-have for any technician, the punch down tool is not a must-have, but you can kind of consider it one, because if you don't have one, it's really going to make your life difficult. It is not impossible to get the job done, though, without a punch down tool. It's just going to take you a heck of a lot longer. It's going to be very, very inconvenient.
The punch down tool is what we also use on network cables, but this is to lock a network cable into a patch panel, if you guys know what a patch panel is, or to lock a network cable, the 8 wires, into a wall box. The wall boxes, for those of you that don't know, is what you'll find below your desk or near your desk on the wall. So instead of having a network cable all the way from the server room or network cabinet all the way to your desk, the cable would only go to, let's say, the wall near your desk. It's going to go into a small little wall box that can fit into the palm of your hand, and that's what we use this punch down tool. And that wall box has actually got an RJ45 port. I can actually show you guys a picture of a wall box. Here's a bit of a picture, just in case you guys are wondering. There's the wall box. You can see there's the port. So that wall box, you can go plug a small little network cable about 1 meter or 2 meters into that, which goes to your computer. Why do we do that? Because if, God forbid, that user breaks that network cable by taking their wheelie chair and riding over it every day or bending the cable, you would have to go replace that whole freaking cable all the way to the network cabinet or to the server room. That is a lot of work, guys. It's going to take a long time. Now, if the user breaks that cable and whatever means, you do not need to change the whole cable. You only need to swap out that small little LAN cable, and normally we technicians have got lots of spares. You can get that user back up and running in mere seconds. Instead of it taking you half an hour or more, you can get this person up and running in mere seconds. I kid you not. All right, and then of course we get cable testing tools. So when it comes to testing, you get a cable tester. There is an example of one of the most common kinds I've seen out there. It just so happens that I also have one which looks identical to that one. Now this tester, you can see there's a bit of a line there in the middle. It actually has a detachable part there. So the left side of this doohickey has 2 ports on the top left. The right part of this doohickey, which is detachable, has 1 port at the bottom right, which you can see there in the picture, and the other port is at the top. So the port at the top will probably be an RJ11 or an RJ45. The other one will be the opposite. The left part will have 2 ports, one being RJ45, the other one will be RJ11. So RJ45, so the folks that don't remember, is for normal LAN cables. Cat5, 5E, Cat6, Cat6A, Cat7, Cat8, that's normal LAN cables. That is an RJ45 connector. Now an RJ11 is for telephone cables. In other words, Cat3, folks. In other words, a POTS line. So this cable tester will allow you to go and test if the cable is connected correctly, if it's configured correctly, and if any of the wires are damaged. So if you just made a brand spanking new network cable, you ideally want all 8 wires to come on, or all 8 lights to come on this machine, and you also want them to come on in the correct order. So if this is a straight cable, for those of you that know what a straight cable is, that means whatever you configure on the one connector will be configured exactly the same on the other connector. So if light 1 comes on, you want light 1 to come on at both sides at the same time. Then it will move on to light 2. You want both light 2s to come on at the same time. You want both light 3s to come on at the same time. Same for 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, of course. If this is a crossover cable, that means the connectors are not the same. It means the cables inside the connectors are not the same. So that normally means connector 1 goes to connector 3. It normally means connector 2 goes to connector 6. 3 goes to 1 again. 4 goes to 4, 5 goes to 5, 6 goes to 2, 7 goes to 7, and 8 goes to 8. So on that machine we have there, if you plug in a cable in there, assuming the cable's not damaged, assuming it's in the correct order, when light 1 on the left goes on, you want light 3 on the right to go on. If light 2 on the left goes on, you want light 6 on the right to go on. If 3 on the left goes on, 1 on the right must go on. If 4 goes on, it must go on both sides at the same time. Same for 5, both sides at the same time. If 6 on the left goes on, number 2 on the right must go on. And if 7 goes on, it goes on at both sides at the same time. And 8 also goes on at both sides at the same time. That is a crossover cable. So straight, same lights at the same time on both sides. Crossover, it'll be in the order I just explained to you guys. Another tool we can use for testing, and if you have this tool or if you ever get this tool, please consider yourself very, very fortunate, because most companies will not give you this. I used to also be an engineer in the field, and my company absolutely refused to give me this tool because it's expensive, and I figured I can go and do it another way. Now, you don't need this tool. I would not say it's compulsory, but it'll definitely make your life a lot easier, and you'll be able to do troubleshooting a lot quicker and a lot easier. So if you've got a lot of cables coming together in one location, that's especially when this thing is very, very useful. It generates a tone, hence the name toner probe. So let's say there's a network cable in some random office. There's only one cable in that office, and now eventually the other end of that cable ends up in a network cabinet or the server room where there's many, many other cables. I would like to know which one of those many, many, many cables at the network cabinet or the server room is the cable in that office I just spoke of. Now what I could do is I can go and plug that tone generator onto the cable in that office, and then I go and take that magic wand. You can think of it as like a little wand. If you hover that wand near the correct cable, it'll actually generate a tone. It's going to go beep. It's going to do some sort of tone that it's going to generate. The closer you get to the correct table, the louder the tone. So that's to allow you to locate which one of those cables is in fact the right cable. Now there's other ways to do it, which is going to take a lot longer, unfortunately, but this is the quickest and the most efficient way to locate a cable where you don't know which one it actually is. All right, folks, speaking of cables, here is a different kind of cable. So up until now, we've mostly been talking about LAN cables. Now we're going to be talking about optical cabling. Before we do that, I just want to mention Ethernet cables is not limited to LAN cables. Yes, we've been talking mostly about LAN cables up until now, but for some reason, a lot of people are under the impression that the word Ethernet means LAN cables. Now, LAN cables is an Ethernet cable, but it's not limited to an Ethernet cable. So if I or anyone says Ethernet cable, it includes LAN cables, but it's not limited to LAN cables. Ethernet cables could be LAN cables, optical fiber cables, coaxial cables. Basically, any form of network cable is seen as an Ethernet cable. Just so FYI, in case you guys didn't know that. Now, getting back to the actual topic here, which is optical cabling, that is fiber. If you guys didn't know, fiber is made out of glass, not copper. So coaxial and LAN cables uses copper to send a signal. Fiber, on the other hand, uses glass, and it uses light. Light gets sent through that glass tube inside the fiber. Yes, guys, there's glass tubes in your fiber, and that allows the signal to transmit. Fiber is pretty much the fastest kind of cable you get, but even though that's the case, did you guys know you get different kinds of optical fiber? Yes, fiber optic cable types. Let me mention a couple to you guys. You get single mode fiber and you get multi-mode fiber. Single mode, for those that don't know, is used over great distances, long distances. That's normally used for outdoor purposes. Multi-mode fiber is used for short distances, and this is normally used for indoor purposes. So if you go somewhere like in a server room, the fiber cables you'll find there, that's normally multi-mode. If you go somewhere outside, from house to house and that kinds of stuff, that's normally single mode fiber. Now, what about the connector types? We already know that a LAN cable uses RJ45. We know that a telephone cable uses RJ11. And by the way, you need to know those connectors for the A+ exam. Now, what about fiber cables? Do you guys need to know the connectors for the exam? Yes, definitely. Now, what you guys might not know is you get multiple kinds of connectors for fiber cables. It's not like a LAN cable where it's one size fits all. No. For fiber, you get many kinds of connectors. There's 3 that you need to know for the exam. Is that all of them? No. There is other kinds of connectors as well. If you go check my N Plus series, you'll find I mention a lot more connectors there. I even show you guys pictures there. But you do not need to know all for A+. You do not need to know all for the A+ exams. There's 3 you need to know specifically for this course in the exam. That 3 is straight tip, which is known as ST, subscriber connector, which is known as SC, and lucent connector, which is known as LC. Now, if you go check in the exam, if they ask you a question about fiber connectors, it'll be something along the lines of, it'll ask you, which one of the following connectors is used for fiber? Or which one of the following connectors are fiber connectors? It might be one, where you can go and choose. It might be a question where you can only choose one answer. Then just look for any one of these three. Sometimes the questions, and this is actually going to be most of the time, they will list 6 or 8 possible choices, and they might say choose all that apply or choose 3. Usually they will just say choose all that apply. And you're going to look for all 3 of these, or as many as possible of these 3. A tip I can give you when it comes to choosing the fiber connectors in the exam, if you find yourself in a situation where you can't remember the answer, and please keep in mind this tip only works in A+, is the connectors all start with 2 letters. Any other connector there is not fiber. So when they say which of the following is fiber connectors in the exam, and you don't remember, I kid you not, just choose everything that's got 2 letters. They're not going to give you the full words. They're not going to say straight tip. They're just going to say ST. They're not going to say subscriber connector. They're just going to list it as SC. They're not going to say loosened connector. They will just list it as LC. So if they ask you which one of the following connectors are fiber connectors, please choose all that apply. I kid you not, tick everything that's got 2 letters and you're going to get the question right without remembering what the connectors are. Now, of course, I do encourage you to actually remember what the connectors are, but if you find yourself in a sticky situation where you just can't remember the connectors, and that's normal, that's called being human, I kid you not, choose anything that's got 2 letters and you'll get them all right. All the other connectors will have more than 2 letters. It'll be an RJ45, RJ11, BNC, RJ58. You're going to see things like that. So the connector names for the other cables will be a heck of a lot longer. Anything that's got 2 letters is fiber. Now that trick does not work in the N plus exam because, like I said, there's more than 3 connectors, and the other connectors doesn't just have 2 letters. They've got a lot longer names. The code names are a lot longer. But very coincidentally, purely by chance, all the fiber connectors in the A plus exam are 2 letters. So if you find yourself in a sticky situation where you can't remember the fiber connector names in the A plus exam, just choose anything you see of 2 letters. You'll get that answer right. Alright, so before we move on to our next topic, just want to re-mention that fiber is in fact made out of glass. So you need to be very careful when working with fiber cable, guys. Do not bend the cable. If you bend the cable, you break the glass inside, which means the light is not going to transmit inside. It actually works with lasers. Sometimes it's just light, sometimes it's laser. So if you were to go and take the connector itself with some of these fiber cables and you look at the connector, you'll see a little red light, a little red laser. Please, for heaven's sake, do not point that directly into your eye. You can damage your eyes by doing that. So do not do that. If you feel curious and you really want to go and do that, look at it from an angle. Do not look directly into the light because it is a laser in some cases. And yeah, you can actually harm your eyes by doing that. Moving on to our next kind of cable, which is the last cable I'm going to mention for you guys. And this is the last topic in this specific section. Coaxial cable. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I think I am. I hope I am. If I'm not pronouncing it correctly, please mention in the comment section down below. Let's have a laugh about it. If I am mentioning it correctly, hell, mate, let me know in the comment section down below too. It'll be interesting to know. So what do we use coaxial cable for? What is the uses? So not too long ago, depending on which country you're in, this used to be used as the antenna behind a TV. So if you had bunny ears or if you had some sort of metal frame network on the top of your ceiling or your roof, your ceiling, that will plug with a cable back to the end of the back of your TV, and it'll give it signal. And that was for the old analog signals. All countries had analog TV signals at some point in time. Some countries still do. Nowadays, we don't use that anymore. Instead, we will use other kinds of coaxial cable, which will plug into some sort of machine of sorts, which will give you a signal. That is now digital signals. Now, the actual connector of coaxial cable varies from cable to cable. It's kind of like fiber, which has got multiple connectors. So there's multiple kinds of connectors you can go and use. Some of them screw in, some of them just plug in. One of the most common connectors you get for coaxial cabling is F connectors, guys. Now, if you look at the pictures I've got there on the right-hand side, that is examples of what a coaxial cable would look like without the connector. So they've got a solid core, which could be solid copper. It could be steel. It can be steel of copper plating. The braiding around that could be copper. It could be steel. And if it's copper, it's good quality. If it's steel, it's not so good quality, and it's normally a heck of a lot cheaper. Right, folks, that brings us to the end of the third main section. Let's move on to the beginning of the fourth and last section. Don't know if you guys remember, but this was called Compare Wireless Networking Types. So up until now, we've mostly been talking about wired network. Now we can talk about wireless. So in the topic of wireless, the very first thing we're going to talk about, which is not really a surprise, is access points. This is commonly known as APs for short. So whenever you hear someone in IT say AP, we're normally talking about an access point. Access points make use of IEEE 802.11. You would remember earlier in this module I said whenever you see .11, that indicates that the network is wireless in nature. If it's 802. Something else, it's probably wired. It's got some form of cable. The 11 tells us it's wireless in nature. Now I'm going to show you guys the different standards we get. Keep in mind you only need to know 4 for this specific course. You get 802.11a. Remember, it's only the letter at the back that's going to change. You get 802.11b. You get 802.11g, not C. There's no C, in case you were wondering. You get 802.11g. Then you get 802.11n. And up until there, that's actually all you need to know for this course. And then to go further than that, just to show you that there are other ones out there, you get 802.11ac and you get 802.11ax. The last two I mentioned for you guys, that's only needed for N+. So if any of you guys plan on going for the N+ exam, make sure you know the last two as well. Make sure you know their maximum distances. Make sure you know their speeds. Make sure you know what they're used for. But if you guys only plan on writing the A+ exam, then I would say forget about the last two. Now, AX is actually surprisingly very, very new. Very new. It was released as recently as 2021 during the COVID pandemic. The other ones, majority of them was released in the 90s, early 2000s, but AX is very, very young. So yeah, guys, A and G is very, very much the same. That's what you'll normally find in your normal router access points. If you want to connect to your office router or your home router or access point, it's usually going to be G. A is exactly the same as G, it just runs at a different frequency. B is usually used for things like Bluetooth. N is usually used for long range communication, but N does unfortunately require direct line of sight. If you look at A and G, that could be something like an access point, and we all know access points can transmit through walls and ceilings and stuff. B being something like Bluetooth, when Bluetooth also penetrates through walls, maybe not such far distance, but it does. N does not go through things. You need a line of sight. So N will probably be like a dish up on the roof, and this will go and point to another dish on another roof somewhere, and this allows you to connect multiple buildings together. So that's if your company offers has multiple buildings, they're quite far from one another, and you would like to connect these buildings to one another wirelessly. If you look at these frequencies, A runs at a frequency of 5 gigahertz. The maximum speed, according to the manual, is 54 megabits per second, but in real life it's a heck of a lot more than that now. B runs at a frequency of 2.4 gigahertz. Maximum speed, according to the manual, is 11 megabits per second, but in real life it's actually more. G runs at a frequency of 2.4 gigahertz. Maximum speed of 54 megabits per second. You can see it's the same as A, it's just a different frequency. N, well, there's actually more than one speed for that and more than one frequency. N can run at a frequency of 2.4 or 5, it's your choice. Depending on the manual you have, some manuals will tell you the speed for N is 150 megabits. Some will tell you it's 300, some will tell you it's 450, some will tell you it's 600, or even some other random value. And this causes a lot of confusion because now people don't know which one it is. It's actually all of them. It depends on the amount of channels you've got, folks. The more channels you've got, the more speed you've got. So if it's one channel, it's 150. Two channels, 300. Three channels, 450. And 4 channels, 600. You'll notice it keeps going up in 150 increments. So you can think of these channels as lanes on a highway. The more lanes you've got on a highway, the more cars you can handle per minute. These channels work in the same way. So if you've got more channels, you can handle more traffic. Huh? Makes sense, doesn't it? Now, still on the topic of wireless, guys, there is certain things that sometimes causes interference. The main frequency you guys need to know here is probably going to be G. That's the one we use the most out there. What frequency does G run at? It runs at 2.4. Now, unfortunately for us, majority of things out there runs at 2.4. A lot of things runs at 2.4, and that's important for the exam, guys, because it causes interference. So I'm going to try and keep this as close as possible to the manual, to the course, and what you guys will encounter in the exam. So other things that interferes with 2.4, and I'm keeping this now to the course, is things like cordless phones. When we say cordless phones, we're not talking about cell phones. We're talking about the kind of phone where you'll plug a normal landline into it. It's got a charging base, and this phone is now plugged into this charging base. And if someone makes a call to you, or you would like to make a call, you pick up this phone. It's wirelessly communicating with the charging base. That is a cordless phone. Now that signal where it communicates wirelessly with the charging base, and all that kinds of jazz, that runs at 2.4 gigahertz. So if you've got a phone like that near your access point, near your router, near your laptop, near your cell phone, you're not going to have Wi-Fi, or it's going to keep dropping. So that is called interference. It runs at the same frequency. Other things that runs at the same frequency is a microwave oven. Yes, folks, a microwave oven. This is one of the most common ones they love asking in exam. The way you can expect this question to be phrased, this is not if you're one of the unfortunate souls to get this question, is they'll say, user 1 complains he or she has no internet during lunchtime. What could be a possible reason for this? And they're going to mention 4 totally random things in there. One of those random things you'll see is a microwave oven. What do people do during lunchtime? They heat up their lunch. So if you go and plug a microwave oven into a wall socket and you can see the LCD display, that on its own doesn't do anything. It's only once you actually start the machine, when you actually start heating up something in the machine, when that magnetron starts doing its thing, that emits 2.4 gigahertz. It runs at the same frequency. So I don't think this is going to be a problem in the medium to large size company, because they've got dedicated sections, kitchens, which is nowhere near any access points or routers. But if this is a small little house or a small home office kind of environment, then I suppose it's possible. So guys, now you know. Other things that can cause interference, this is not actually covered in the exam, I'm just throwing it in there as an extra, is these baby monitors you get these days. Baby monitors actually also run at 2.4 gigahertz, guys. Yeah, now you know. Anyway, let me make some room here. I'm going to remove all these wireless standards here because I need more room here. So, what do we use access points for? What do they do? So we already know this is known as an AP for short. It simply takes your network and it broadcasts it wirelessly. So that existing LAN cable network you've got in your home or your office, all you need to do is you just take any one of those network cables and you plug into the back of this access point, or the bottom, it's usually the back, and it's going to take that network of yours and it's going to broadcast it wirelessly. It's the exact same network, guys. It's simply broadcasting it wirelessly so that people can connect to it with their phones, their tablets, or if they want to go and connect wirelessly with a laptop, they can at least do that. That is the purpose of an access point. So this can bridge with wired networks via a switch. So you plug a network cable into something like a switch, you plug the other end of that cable into your access point, and that's going to allow you to bridge with wired networks. It interconnects wireless clients, stations with one another. Now you know. Folks, believe it or not, that is finally the end of the 4th section and the end of this module. My mouth feels like a cotton ball from all that talking. So before you guys disappear on me, don't disappear just yet. Thank you very much for watching this course, for supporting the channel. For those of you that did actually give a like to the video, I do appreciate you guys for doing that. And speaking of appreciating, I just want to extend a special thank you to the sponsors of this channel. That will be the Patreon sponsors, the PayPal sponsors, those of you that clicked on the thanks button below the video. A lot of you guys have been buying me milkshakes or coffee. All of you guys, I appreciate you guys. And here is a bit of a list of some of the Patreon sponsors and the PayPal sponsors. Thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate your support. And once again, I also appreciate those of you that's been clicking on the thanks button and it's been buying me a milkshake or a coffee. If any of you guys would like to sponsor me or just do some sort of donation, you can find all of that in the video description down below. I mean, heck, you can even just buy me a coffee or a milkshake. I'll be honest with you guys, if you buy me a milkshake, I'm probably going to give it to my kids. I've got two small kids. And yeah, if you're going to buy me a milkshake, I'm probably going to end up giving it to my kids. But at the very least, you're going to make someone smile by doing that. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching this module. I will see you or talk to you on module 5 of the A+ course. Enjoy.